Hello, everybody. Welcome. My name is Charlie Sextro. I'm one of the senior programmers here at Sundance. And I'd like to welcome you out to the final Cinema Cafe of 2025, presented by Audible. And first, I want to thank the incredible team here who put together all the off-screen events here at the Filmmaker Lodge, and General Glenn for holding it down and their incredible work that they do. So this is going to be exciting this morning. Today you will be watching a podcast recording. This podcast is Visitations with Daniel Noah and Elijah Wood. They're the team behind the production company SpectreVision, who have a long history of here. In about the last decade, they've had 6 films that they've produced premiere at the festival. Incredible films that I love very much, like Mandy, A Girl Walks Home Alone at Night, Cooties, The Greasy Strangler, and Bitch. And this year, they are also producers on a film that premiered in our midnight section, the Welsh cosmic folk horror film Rabbit Trap. And because we are squeezing Elijah dry of every possible thing we can, Elijah is also a juror at this year's festival for the festival's next section. And today they will be joined speaking with another juror in the festival, the incredible Celine Song, who we had the absolute honor of premiering her first feature, Past Lives, at the 2023 festival. So please do me the honor of welcoming up Daniel Noah, Elijah Wood, and Celine Song.
Hello. Hi, everyone. So many of you have packed this room. That's so lovely.
So nice.
Yeah. Hello, Celine.
Hey.
Thanks for agreeing to do this. I literally asked Celine yesterday. We had our jury deliberation. We've been jurors at the festival. You were a U.S. dramatic?
Yeah, U.S. dramatic. Yeah.
I was next. And then I just walked up to her and I was like, hey, Celine, so we have this podcast, and I gave her the whole pitch for what our podcast is, but it's not that. When we do it live, it's totally different. Are you down? And she was like, yeah, totally.
And I thought I was really down, and I'm still down. But
oh, good.
I'm still down, but I didn't realize that people were going to be here, and I had to do photos. There's like cameras. I didn't realize. I was just like.
We tricked you.
So, I mean, yeah, I really.
What did you think? We were going to be at a coffee shop or something?
Yeah, I thought we were going to be in some room, and we'll just do a podcast
podcast,
recording.
yeah. I didn't know there was going to be a photo call, so that was also a surprise to me as well.
Yeah.
Well, hi. So, so the way we do this when we do a live version of our podcast is we ask our guests to come prepared with the 5 works of art that most maybe influence your voice as a filmmaker, and then we just kind of walk through them and
kind of riff on what those things
see
are.
what happens.
Yeah. Have a conversation.
All right. Well, so what's your first work of art?
Well, I was actually thinking, because there are, of course, so many things growing up that mean a lot to me, but I was just thinking about the poem that I wrote as a child. It's the first poem I ever wrote, and it was a poem, I forget when I wrote it, but it was like, I don't know, I was like quite young, maybe like 5 or something very young, and I wrote a poem about how it's horrible that a butterfly gets eaten by a spider, but also the spider is hungry and needs to eat, and how hard that is. I think that was a basic thing about the poem. And I think about that poem a lot as like, it's the first thing that I wrote, and whenever I get lost in trying to figure out what I'm writing or what I'm working on, I think about that poem a lot. So in a way, It's a very influential poem.
How old were you when you wrote it?
I think I was like 4.5, 5 or something like that.
Oh my God.
Yeah, no, but it was one of those things where it's like where you're so young, and it's like you're being told that you need to write a poem at school. In Korea, and then everybody's writing different kinds of poems about their family and things like that, and I wrote this thing about how about a butterfly getting eaten by a spider, and I remember thinking, I just think about it sometimes when I'm like really lost about what I want to make next. Sometimes I just I always think about it, because I go like, well, that must be the essence of what I like or what I believe in or like what I want to write about. you know?
That's so interesting.
Yeah.
As like the core of your artistic
Yeah,
voice.
like
and-
it's like a core memory or like
Yeah.
it's like a core work.
Yeah.
Right. And if someone asks me what is the most important piece of work that I've ever done, I'm sure when I'm 90,
You'll think about-
I'll still think about that poem because it just it is the fundamental part of what interests me about art. To be
Yes.
honest, yeah.
It's so interesting.
I love that.
I had one of those too before I could even write. I dictated a story to my mother, and I drew the pictures. And it was the story of a misunderstood, outcast swamp monster. And I look back, was probably around the same age, and I look back sometimes and go, I'm still doing that. I'm still making movies about like monster misfits, or who are they don't mean to be scary. They mean well. It's Miss Frankenstein. But which I'd never seen at that age. So it's so interesting. So do you think that we're just sort of born with these proclivities and interests, or do you feel like were you sorting through something that was happening in your life?
Well, I think there must be something that interests you from that's what would be is a little bit different. But I think that probably the way your brain works is probably something that gets developed early on for whatever reason, because we all have a unique brain. I mean, it's interesting because I think it's contradictory. I think we all have the same brain on some level, but I think we also have the different brain. And I think and how your brain works mechanically, I think that it's forming already as a kid. So I feel like what interested me then, I still get excited about now, Yeah.
Do you remember where the idea came from? Like, was there actually a butterfly?
I think I was just too young for that.
Yeah.
I was too young to really be like, inspiration struck me. Like that'd be
Yeah.
pretty, I don't know. I don't even fully, I only know it having read it. Does that make sense? It's almost like sometimes you do it and
came out
then
of
you're
you.
like, and then you read it and you're like, oh, and then you kind of learn your own writing as you write it. And I think that's also true of everything else I've ever written. I feel like in general, writing something or making something is what I would call an erotic act, because you're trying to reach something that you can't quite. I've never been able to finish something that I thought I was smarter than, I always have to believe that the thing that I'm writing is much smarter than me and that it's hard to reach. So there's always a longing for it too. I'm always longing for it because I'm not as smart as that, or I'm not as wise as that, or I'm not as good as that. So I think that in that way, often the writing and then the thing that you just made will teach you about something about your life or what you believe or whatever. But it's the work is gonna teach you. It's never. I've found that it's never that I'm not as smart as the thing that I'm working on. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I'm always dumber, and I'm always trying to be a little bit smarter, so that I can reach it.
Well, it's a process of finding it too.
Yeah.
Rather than like knowing exactly what it is, you're reaching for something.
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, it's so true. You can how an artist can learn about themselves through their work. Like you're sorting through things you don't even realize are on your mind. I've told this story before, but there's this amazing book by William Styron called Darkness Visible. He wrote Sophie's Choice, and where he was a high functioning alcoholic throughout his life, and he quit drinking fairly late, in his 50s, and he became debilitatingly depressed and realized he had been unwittingly self-medicating. Had no idea that that's what he was doing. I think he went into an asylum. It was really bad. He dried out. He got himself back together, and he started looking at his books. He started looking at his stories, realizing that he had been describing his own depression all of his life. Like somehow there was a direct connection between his art mind and this sort of secret that he had inside of him, and that he wasn't even aware of. He had never experienced depression until he stopped drinking.
Well, I think that, first of all, I studied psychology in college, and I thought I was going to be a psychologist. That was the plan. Yeah, that was initially the plan, and then I didn't do that. But the thing is, I feel like in general, though, I think something like that, where you discover in the thing that you just made, but also I feel like in films, or like when you watch a film, because I think art is ultimately a communicative thing. It's about communication between yourself and another human being at the end of the day. So to me, or like that's how I see it. That's how I, because some people think of art as self-expression, but I think of art as a way to communicate. So
Yeah.
you've given, right? Because I think it depends on the thing, but I feel like because of that, when I find that when I'm watching a film or when I'm reading a book or something like that, the thing that you're encountering is the person who made it, right? So there is no matter how much we try to hide it, right? Even the most like hiding, most not revealing piece of art, you can tell in the way that they're hiding the honest truth about whoever it is that's making the art. So in that way, that makes so much sense that once you objectively observe your own work, you discover things about yourself in a way that you're encountering the person who made it. So I think that happens sometimes when I, of course, look at something that I made years ago. I mean, even when I look at past lives now, like I feel like I'm somebody who's encountering that person, right? And then thankfully I like that person, I love that person.
Yeah.
But I can imagine, and I've been in a situation where I haven't liked that person when I look at my old work, Not often. There's like one play that I wrote that I remember reading it and being like, who did I want to be, huh? That sucks. Like she was so insecure, or whatever.
Yeah.
But I think in that way, you can always have some sense of learning about yourself. There's a bit of a self-discovery element to making art. And then the best thing you can do is to be honest and trust. Trust that the person who's making the thing is lovable and capable of love, right? So that's what we're all hoping for.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I love the notion of your poem, going back to that too, is, it's about a beautiful creature being eaten by a scary creature, but then also feeling sympathy for the scary creature.
Of course.
I think that's such a beautiful thing, and I can understand why that stuck with you for so long, because it's so sort of fundamental. It's like, we all look at things that are beautiful, and the notion that could be harmed by, but it's understanding the thing that is harming that thing.
Yeah.
And that there's humanity in that as well, and looking to see both sides.
Yeah.
It's really special.
I think so. I think there's some real truth in it that I feel like in my totally unconscious childness, something was right. But the thing is, like, but that's why I think I'm interested in it. But I think it's like when you're saying using the word beautiful to describe a butterfly. But I think there's another word
yes,
for
you're
it.
absolutely right.
Right.
Yeah.
But no. I think that's correct. But also there is weakness. Right.
Right.
It's meant to be a prey.
Vulnerability.
Yeah, there's preyness.
Yes.
It's meant to be eaten. Right. Because spider is the predator for that.
Right.
So in a way, so you're like, and how could you say that the spider is not also beautiful in its own
Absolutely.
predatorness?
And that is also the
right?
natural order of things.
Yeah, exactly.
And spiders are beautiful.
And they are beautiful, right? They are
Yes.
able to, think about the way they trap. Like those are, so the webs are beautiful. They're marvel,
Yes.
right? So
Yes.
it's kind of like, but I think it's like when something is being destroyed for its weakness, sometimes we use the words like beautiful.
Yeah.
Right? And I think, I don't know, there's so much in that.
So
poem.
much.
Anyway, I feel like that's why I feel like maybe it's the first thing, because it's the youngest thing.
Yeah.
It's the thing that,
That's amazing.
Do you feel like you can see that theme played out through other works that you've created?
Well, I think that I would probably talk about the next things that I've really attached to as I was growing up.
Yeah, great.
That I've really connected to that. Yeah.
So what's the next one?
Well, I feel like, I was really, really into Albert Camus for in all of high school. Like, if you asked, like, you would have boyfriends or whatever in high school, but if you asked anybody from my high school, like, who Celine's boyfriend is, they'll be like, Albert Camus. Like, literally, like, that would happen. Like, it would be really bad. Like, I was obsessed. But I think it's because of the way that it was kind of my first encounter with existentialism. But also, like, you're a teenager. So I don't know. As a teenager, I think that I was obsessed with Albert Camus because he was talking about, the biggest thing that he did is this myth of Sisyphus, which is about basically every moment that you spend not killing yourself is you choosing life, right? So I think that as a teenager, there are thoughts about like why you exist and why you live in the world, and you feel down, you feel high, you don't know what the purpose of your life is. Big feelings, because you're hormonal and you're young and you're just like, I feel powerless. I'm growing up in, Canada, in Markham, and you're just like, like I don't smoke, but I know smokers, So it's like, you're just feeling like, I don't know, what if I were all black and walked around? I guess I still do, but, like I walked around all black and just be mad at everything. And then, of course, Albert Camus is saying, it's like, well, it's amazingly heroic that you don't kill yourself, right? There's something amazing about that philosophy. And it's such in a way, it's an extreme thought, but it's like, well, it is true. Every day you choose to be alive is a day you choose to be alive. Right, and there's something, and then what are you going to do with that life, right?
Yes.
Because it's something that you chose, and there's a kind of an amazing autonomy or a sense of choice, and there's a bit of decision making that, and therefore authority and power that you're given as otherwise a powerless Canadian teenager, that every day you're being like, oh no, but I chose life. I choose life every day, and I'm here every day. So what am I going to do with my life, right? What do I want my life to be?
Yeah.
So I think that really was a very big part of, it's kind of the next part of like my consciousness, I would say. Yeah.
Was there a particular work by Camus that was the one you carried with you in your jacket, or was it just the complete works?
Oh, I mean, I feel like the first thing I read was The Stranger, because I think that's the gateway Camus, right? But I think the one that I really
I've never read him.
You read that?
No.
It's amazing. It's so interesting. It's so slow for most of it, and then like the last 5 pages, you're just like, what are we talking about? Like, like they just punch you. He just punches you in the face, and you're like, wah! And then the movie's done. That's not the movie. The book is done.
Wow.
But I think that the one that I really think about a lot is the Fall. I don't know if you guys read that, but it's like The Fall. But the whole book is great. But there's one moment where this man is the main character is looking over the bridge and contemplating jumping off of it. And there's a lot that happens, but then he hears somebody laughing behind him somewhere, and he turns around and he doesn't see anybody laughing. And he's trying to locate who was the person who laughed. And the laugh was like not cynical, it was just a beautiful, life-affirming laugh. And then he starts to wonder, did I laugh? Did I laugh like that? And then he goes, maybe it was somebody who was laughing about something else and walked right by and I just missed him. So there's something about that, and then he, of course, doesn't jump, It
draws his focus away.
Yeah, there's something about it. And then also he describes it so beautifully as just a beautiful, life-choosing laugh. Yeah. And then it changes his life completely, hearing that laugh. Wow. I really, really like that book.
That sounds incredible.
It's a really cool book.
Okay,
but,
I'm gonna get that.
Yeah, I mean, I think that was that was what I was really into when I was like long boots wearing goth girl in high school, being like angry and then being upset about my English teacher, like not understanding Kafka. Like I was like, why don't you get Kafka, huh? Like I was so mad at them, and then I took philosophy class, and then they said Nietzsche is a nihilist, and I was like, that is nonsense. I was arguing with them in the middle of the class. I was such an angry little teenager, being Nietzsche's not a nihilist. We need to discuss this, When he said God is dead, he just said it in a nihilistic way. I was so furious, but Albert Camus really kept me happy. My boyfriend.
You moved to Canada. You were born in Korea.
I was born in Korea. I was there for 12 years, and then maybe 13, 14, something like that. And then I moved to Canada, and I grew up in Canada. And I was there through college.
Okay. Where in Canada?
Toronto.
Toronto's great.
Toronto's great.
It is.
It's a great place to grow up.
I bet.
And it's a great place to move away from too. To move to New York, to New York from. It's very close.
Which is a good upgrade from Toronto.
Yeah.
They're similar and very different too.
Yeah. Well, I mean, Toronto's much nicer to live in.
Probably. Yeah.
Higher quality of living is what I would say about Toronto. Yes. Yeah. Very clean. Yeah.
That's cool. What a cool place to grow up.
Yeah.
Good food, good art.
Yeah,
good record stores in Toronto.
Yes, of course. So much culture. Yeah.
It's funny. I'm just thinking about the Fall. Well, I've never read The Fall, but the title is reference to something that never occurs,
Yeah.
which is really interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah. Apropos of nothing, but
I love that.
so what is your next?
So
next work?
I went to college, and then I took this German literature class as an extension of me being a angry goth girl.
What was your major in college?
Oh, sorry, I was majoring in psychology.
Oh, right, you
And I minored in philosophy. And then it was interesting because of my philosophy class, I feel like we were learning pretty traditional philosophy, like Kant, things like that. But then there's one professor who was teaching postmodernism and existentialism, and I was obsessed with his classes. So that's why I ended up minoring in that. But I took this one German literature class where I basically encountered like every important formative piece of literature ever, everything from Günter Grass to like, we did read Hesse, Hermann Hesse, even though I knew him before, and then Thomas Mann. But I think the person who influenced me the most was Bertolt Brecht, who I was obsessed with. And this, I think, is what's connected to my child poem about butterfly. Because the thing about Bertolt Brecht is that, of course, we all know him for the formal parts of his work, which is like breaking of the fourth wall, which I think is I think everything I've ever written has a breaking of the fourth wall. And a part of the breaking of the fourth wall is implicating and including the audience, right? It's really, and as if you guys have seen Past Lives, you guys know the first scene of the film is Nora turns, the main character Nora turns and looks at the audience. And the camera, people who are supposedly sitting behind the camera, the people who are talking at the bar, the couple who's at the bar, they're trying to figure out who these three characters who are main characters in the film are, right? Who they are to each other. And at the end of that little sequence, Nora turns and looks at the audience. And that's always been both an implication and an invitation and a way to say, actually, you're a part of the story too. And I think Bertolt Brecht has always been somebody who, because all of his work is about implicating the audience and including the audience and turning towards the audience and speaking directly at the audience. So every play I've ever written has breaking of the fourth wall.
Wow.
And of course, Past Lives, and then my next movie does too. So to me, I mean, in that way, he's been probably the most influential person. But also, he has a quote. He has two quotes that I think about regularly when I'm making something. First is, I'm paraphrasing, but it's that just because it is good, when we're talking about good and evil, just because it is good, it doesn't mean that it is given that it is weak. So, in fact, it is not an excuse. If you are good, it is not an excuse to be weak. In fact, for you to be meaningful good, you also need the strength to defeat the evil, right? So there is a part of it where it's like, well, weakness and strength are different things than good and evil. And to me, I think about that so much, and I think that's so connected to the butterfly and the spider, right? Because it's about how it's like, just because the butterfly is, it's not a given that just because the butterfly is weaker, that it is good, right? It might be, but I think that it is something that has to be defendable. The good needs to be able to defend itself. Yeah. And I think that about the way power works in the world, right? We need to, I think it's so easy for us to be like, man, we were defeated again. The good was defeated again. Good always gets defeated. But I also believe that the good needs to be able to defend itself. And I think that the good needs to be able to fight. And I think that to me is really fundamental to the way, not only what I believe as when I think about art and in the things I make, but also think about that, of course, as a human being and a citizen and everything else too. And then the other quote I really like, and this is exclusively about art, where he says he had a wooden donkey at his desk, and he had a little sign in front of it that says, "Even he must understand it," as in everything I make, even that donkey has to understand it, right? So I think that that speaks to accessibility and commercial, and I think because I grew up ESL, I am very wary of using SAT words, you know, not because I don't know SAT words. You know, I got normal education, but I think it is just something where I think about when it comes to accessibility of language, right? It's like, well, if there is a simpler way to say something, then why not say that, right? Am I trying to prove that I went to grad school, right?
Right.
So there is a kind of I think there is a very real intellectual snobbery or intellectual elitism that I think that is easy to fall into. And I think that whenever I think about that, when I'm like looking at my first draft and reading through it, I'm always reading it thinking, can a donkey understand this, right?
I love that.
Right, and then also like, can people I know who are ESL, right, who are encountering the work, who maybe don't know the language that well, who are maybe coming from a foreign background, whose English is good, but it's not, you know, can they sit in my play and my movie, and can they understand and feel everything? And to me, I think that that's always been a great, important guiding principle in making work that is personal and important to me and specific, but also accessible.
Yeah.
And I would say commercial, because I would always think about Past Lives as an indie film, but I would think of it as an indie film. It's you know, half of it is in Korean, you know, but I think about that movie as in the same way that I would think about any commercial film. I think of it as a commercial film, and what I mean by that is, of course, is that even a donkey will understand it, as in like everybody in the audience has to have a way for them to access it.
Yeah,
right?
a way in.
Oh yeah, right. It's like it doesn't really work for me that, you know, well, it's not meant for the half of the audience, right? It doesn't really work for me as an artist myself, and I think it is because of my relationship to Bertolt Brecht.
Yeah.
Because knowing that, you know, this like German expressionist, you know, whatever, you know, this theater person.
Yes.
For him to be like, well, even a donkey must understand it. I'm like, well, absolutely.
Yeah.
And this is also connected to my theater teacher in my grad school at Columbia, who used to say, there's nothing romantic, and she is on like a really experimental like theater director who does like Trojan Women only in movement, you know, like, you know, an amazing, and Bogart. And she used to say, there's nothing romantic about empty seats. Doesn't matter how, right? And she's somebody who like would do Hamlet, where an actor is eating like a pig's heart on stage, you know? And she would be like, there's nothing romantic about an empty seat. Your entire theater has to be full, right? So I think, and I really believe that. I don't believe in art that's for 10 people who have a movie subscription. I think we should all get a movie subscription. But I mean like who have an entire Criterion collection. I don't think a movie should be for that. I think movies should be for everyone. But it doesn't mean that it all should be you know, crappy popcorn movies.
No.
Right? But I mean, even it should be a good movie that is for everyone. You know.
I agree. I mean, I think all art should be made for everybody, and I think all art doesn't necessarily always translate to everybody because it's subjective. But the intent behind it shouldn't be to reach a specific intellectual base. It should be to reach everybody, because it is an extension of yourself. It's a human act. It's, you know, I love that. That as a guiding principle is fantastic. Really cool. That's so cool.
Well, I would amend that and say I think it depends on the artist.
Yes, I agree.
Yeah.
This is me. Yeah.
This is
to
you.
me, specifically. Yeah.
Yeah.
Because you're right. I don't know if it's I think everybody can have their own audience in mind. But I feel like for me, it's that at least the intention. You're right, because it's not going to be for everyone. No, nothing is.
No,
but
exactly.
But the intention for me is always that it's like, well, can somebody that I know who is ESL, who doesn't know everything, can about whatever, you know, can they still come in, sit down, and enjoy it, you know? And maybe they'll walk away being like, whatever, too slow, or whatever. But I still want them to be able to sit through it, you know?
Well, these are the choices that define us as artists, right? Yes. You know, and I studied dramatic writing at NYU a big gazillion years ago, and we had a class with a playwright named Wendy Wasserstein. I don't know, does anybody remember?
Of course I do.
Okay. So all of us pretentious writers were like, oh God, Wendy Wasserstein, you know, she wrote big blockbuster Broadway plays. But I think I learned more from her than I did from any of the other professors. And I remember one time she said, you know, all of us writers were so hung up on being so clever all the time. But I'm telling you, at some point in your script, a character has to just say what's going on, right? Say the theme or say the premise,
I mean, maybe not the character, but maybe the movie. Like
well,
maybe
that was
the
her.
thing,
That was
right?
Wendy Wasserstein's. That she would literally put the words in the mouth of her
I mean,
protagonist.
in theater, sometimes saying it has very powerful.
Yes,
Right?
yes.
Like in theater, you can just sort of say it's like, I don't know. You can just create such worlds just with words that are spoken in the room. Like my metaphor is always like, I can be here. Hello, everyone. Welcome to Mars. And then the theater audience will be in Mars, right? And we don't have to do anything, right? Like, but then if it's a movie, you have to all go and build Mars or go to Mars to shoot it, But in theater, that's what's magical about it. Time and space is so, it's just conjured with language that gets spoken, right? So you have to just say it's like maybe we're, like, it's like, we're in the middle of. We're in the middle of a desert, right? And then the actors are talking like they're in the middle of a desert. And then everybody in the audience is like, wow, it's as if I can smell this, sand, So I think that to me, it's like that's, and then because it's happening in the imagination of the actors. So I feel like maybe that's part of what you're saying.
I think we're all, as artists, my feeling is we're all desperately trying to describe our own experience of being alive in the world. And so whatever that experience is dictates these decisions. One of my favorite filmmakers is Claire Denis. And having seen her films over and over again, people often say, well, her movies have no plots or they have no stories. And what I finally came to understand about her is that the stories or the plots of her films are as articulated and built as a Michael Bay film. They're just hidden. They're just obfuscated under layers of art, right? And that's why you return over and over again to these films, is because there's a puzzle that you're trying to solve. You sense there's a pea under the mattress, right? And that works for people who love films like that, right? On the opposite end of the spectrum, we hear now that there are executives at Netflix who are instructing writers to build screenplays for people who are on their phones, right? Who are only sort of paying attention, right? Now, of course, that makes us all want to puke, right? But there are people out there who want that.
Right.
It's not my world, but and it's certainly not your world, right? I don't know where I'm going
Makes
with
me
this.
so mad.
I know, it makes me so
Makes
mad
you
too.
wanna be a
It
goth
makes me
girl
so mad,
again.
too. Well, funny, I'll sit down to watch a movie with my wife, and I have this rule, like, we don't start the movie until we finish dinner, because you're like, I'll see her like looking at her plate,
Right.
and I'll be like, "You're missing it."
Yeah.
Like,
you can't look down.
You can't look
for
away.
like 2
But when you make a film, you're in the editing room, and you're literally, it's like every single little fragment of information is part of the design, right? It's what there was that clip that Quentin was here, I guess, last week, and he was lamenting the death of the theatrical experience, and what he said I thought was really interesting is that he wasn't complaining about streaming being small. He was complaining about the necessity of having undivided attention.
The sacred
right?
space of a theater.
But he was like, I build this the way he put it was, I think, like, I own you
For that time.
For that time.
Sure.
You're mine. But what I'm doing, it's a very
like something you
aggressive
would
way of
say.
saying it. But his point was, and what I hope to do with that ownership is give you an experience, right? Yeah. And so, every little bit of minutia is all part of a giant puzzle, right? That
Well, I think it requires a lot of responsibility and trust that goes with it, right? Because it's like, for like the 90 minutes, if I'm asking you to sit in a theater, and I feel like, by the way, theater, it's more awkward to leave in the middle of it, because the actors that are working so hard, they've been doing this show like 10 times a week. They're looking at you as you get up and walk, so you can't leave. No. But because I was in theater for 10 years, so that was how I started. I was a playwright. So I was in theater for 10 years. To me, it was like an amazing boot camp, because in your relationship to the audience. Because it's only, I was thinking about this, there's not a huge audience. Like, even if I had, like, Hamilton is the only play that has that a lot of people have seen, right? It's like here, like you can have a YouTube video that has more views than an entire run of a very successful Broadway play, right? So the truth is that it's like, it's not a very big audience, the theater audience, but it's a pretty raw audience because you're usually in the room with an actual people who are encountering the animal that is the play. And, you know, you learn a lot really fast, as in like, you learn when the audience doesn't laugh, and they should. And you realize when they fall asleep, and you realize when they walk out, right? So because of that, in a kind of a small scale way where the consequence doesn't feel so stressful, because it's only about 30 people in a room watching your play, there is a very real thing where you're like, you just learn really fast what the audience is like and what interests them, right? So, but I think that it's like, so I'm so used to really concentrating audience that's there, right? And that is that they're a little bit in a hostage situation, right? Because like usually, especially in a play that I would do where it would be like 30 people in the audience, like then it's really hard to leave, right? So it's the hostage situation. So, and then when you leave, everybody knows. Like the other 28 people, if 2 people leave, the other 20 people watch and like, oh, they're leaving, oh my God. The actors stop and they're like, you know, like they're pissed. Like, you know, like, so it's such a dramatic thing to leave. So people don't leave. So they're often in a situation where they're they're stuck. And part of that is that you learn a lot about the responsibility because now you're in a situation where you're taking care of them, right? And it doesn't mean you're not challenging them, but then you just have a responsibility for the 90 minutes or whatever that you have them. Yeah. So yeah, I think, it's like for those 90 minutes, I own you. And I'm like, yeah, but part of the ownership is you have a lot of responsibility, right? Because God forbid they fall asleep. It's your personal responsibility that they thought it was boring. It's personal responsibility. So I don't know, it's kind of high stakes, right?
Totally.
Yeah, but then Netflix, if you're just making something where the actors are showing up and then they're describing the scene because they expect you to be on your phone, then the stakes are not very high. It doesn't have to be very good.
You can always feel it when you're watching episodic television, or you know, when they're like every 7 minutes the protagonist reiterates the plot and the stakes. No one ever.
I'm concerned about like a lot of writing being considered good writing, or like a lot of acting being considered good acting. I'm really concerned about that. You know what I mean?
Sure.
Yeah, like I'm always just like, it's like, was that the best piece of performance I've seen, or is it the most?
Yeah.
You know, like, is it the most? Or is it like, like, is it like a piece of writing and you're like, well, is it the best piece of writing we read? Or is it that there was just like 10 monologues in it and it was just so much writing that we could all be like, look at that writing.
Because we're just, bombarded with something that's intense.
Yeah, exactly. So I'm like,
We were. This is a story that makes me look terrible, but we were at.
oh no, I'm nervous.
We were at Fantastic Fest, and what was the name of Harmony's new film? The baby face thing?
Baby Killer.
Baby
Wasn't
Killer?
it?
No, that's
Baby Killers?
Someone must
Killer
know.
Babies?
The baby faces? No one? No one. Wow, okay. We had
Baby Assassin?
No. Baby mouth? Baby...
Don't remember.
No.
Did it involve killing babies?
No, it's extraordinarily violent.
Well, Harmony has a company called Edgelord.
Okay.
And they're making kind of experimental content.
Very provocative.
For the purpose of sort of like getting a reaction. It's sort of like anti-cinema.
Yeah.
And this thing was basically like following people in baby masks, like robbing and killing people.
Brutally murdering people, yeah.
That was the movie.
So we had
Baby Invasion.
Thank you, Baby Invasion. Yes.
Thank you.
Yeah. So we had spent a little time with him earlier in the day, and he had told us he's very excited about the movie and invited us to the film.
And I couldn't make it, so you did.
You weren't there.
I was not there, but you
you're
did
a lucky
see it.
man. Yeah. So his mission accomplished. The film is very difficult.
It's provocative.
And I couldn't take it, and so I was like, I have to leave.
Yeah.
But we were invited by the filmmaker, and
Sure.
I'm like, he's probably not around. No, run right into him on the way out of the theater. Yeah, and I was like, I'm sorry, man, I can't do it. Anyway,
I'm sure he understood.
he probably loved it. Yeah,
he loved it.
He was like, yes. So okay, what is number 4?
Yeah.
Right, number 4? Oh, yeah, we're at number 4. I would say Children of Men. It's my favorite film. If someone asked me, if someone asked me what my favorite film is in the world, I would say it's Children of Men.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, yeah. And I feel like to me it was like really watching it and experiencing that film for the first time. I remember feeling like having a really visceral reaction to the whole movie, mainly because I think that it was the film at the time that expressed how I feel about the world best at the time, because I think that there's something about it, even though it is set in a not quite our reality, there was such truth in the way that the whole society was playing out this scenario. And I think that there's a kind of a freeing element to it where I felt like I was quite freed by that movie. As in, like, it suddenly made me feel like I could do anything, you know? As in, like, I could make anything. And it kind of opened up the possibility of, like, actually you can talk about the things that you want to talk about without fear or without wondering if it is going to be understood, right? Because I think that what's amazing about that film is how specific it is, right? It is so specific about this made-up problem, right? Which is that there are no more children. So this problem then became something that we could actually understand the society that we live in on. So the way that everybody was handling this problem reflected how we as a society were handling every problem.
Right.
And I think that in that way, I was just, I don't know, I was just quite obsessed with it. And I was just thinking about it. It's the kind of movie where it could just be on and I'll just like sit down and I'll just watch it. And then it could be on an hour later and I'll just sit down and I'll just watch it again. And on top of that, it's like, it is this, actually it's a very political film that I'm able to enjoy and in a way where it just kind of gets in your skin without me sitting there eating it like it's vegetables. You know, I think about this a lot. I feel like there are movies that are like vegetables that you're just, right? Like where you're just kind of like,
good for us.
they're really good for us. So you
Yeah,
have to watch it and you're just like, okay, I have to watch it. It's vegetable. You have to eat it. You have to eat a certain amount of it, right? And then there's, of course, candy. There's you watch certain movies and there's candy. And you're like, listen, I'm not here for nutritional value. I'm here for pleasure. I'm here for pure pleasure. I'm here to watch candy. I'm trying to eat candy, right? And then, of course, there are meals. There's like a steak meal with the little asparagus.
I love this so much, Celine.
And you're like, oh, that's what I want, you know? So, but maybe I'm not in the mood for today. Maybe I'm in the mood for candy today, right?
Yeah.
Or maybe I'm in the mood and maybe I'm prepared today for a vegetable because I'm realizing I need to eat some vegetables, right? So I think that, to me, it was like a very, very political film that was not vegetables. That it felt like it tasted like candy, right? And I think that there was something about it where that kind of, almost like a smooth way that it kind of moved through me, that film. I think it just was so inspiring. And I always thought that, I didn't think that my first movie would be like a movie like Past Lives. I thought my first movie would be more like Children of Men. I always thought that. And then, of course, but then, you know, the story comes and you're like, okay, no.
Yeah.
It's gonna be Past Lives. But yeah, so I think something like that. But I think even when I was making Past Lives, I was thinking, and I think about that with all my plays, but I think I was thinking about it a lot when I was making Past Lives. The thing that I was concerned about with Past Lives is always that I didn't want it to be a vegetable. Wow. You know, I was like, I want it to be a meal. I want it to be a steak with asparagus and like whatever, some stuff on it, but I want it to be well seasoned. But I don't want it to be vegetables. I don't want it to be people that just eat it because they have to, you know.
I think you succeeded. It's not a vegetable.
Okay, good. Yeah.
That's funny. I was just thinking about, I'm sorry, I'm jumping back to something you said earlier, but about the opening of Past Lives, and you were describing the moment when she turns and looks at the camera, and you described it as an invitation. I felt very guilty in that moment. I felt like, oh, I'm eavesdropping. I'm violating this woman's privacy, and I got caught doing it, and I felt very badly that I had done that. But I'm actually equating that to the butterfly and the spider story, because I think in that story I was the spider,
Yeah.
right? And so there's something really, and Children of Men, past lives I think of as a very gentle and loving experience, and Children of Men is none of those things. It's brutal, right? There is this dance between these two energies in what you do, and the idea of having empathy for the predator, the spider, is really interesting. But maybe you won't know the answer, but I'm desperate to know where this came from.
Well, I think totally. I think you're talking about the way that the opening is pretty confrontational. Of
Yes,
past lives,
it's
right?
very confrontational, yeah.
And I think it's meant to be that. But I think that it's like, but I think it really, because that moment is what inspired the whole film in my own life. So it was something that happened in my own life that inspired my the entirety of past lives, which is I was sitting there with my husband and my childhood friend, and I was translating between these two people. And I looked up, and then somebody at the bar they were looking at us, trying to figure out who we were to each other. So when they were looking at us and trying to figure it out, I remember thinking, oh, that person has no fucking clue. They have no idea who we are to each other. And then how would they feel if I actually told them? And how wild that would be, how weird that would be if they actually learned who we were to each other. And I think that really was the beginning of the whole film. So I think that there's a part of it where it's like, yes, without question, I think there is a confrontational part of it, because it is about finding my own authorship in that moment, finding my own power in that moment, right? Because it's also easy for that moment to feel like, oh man, these people are being observed, right? Because the whole film, Past Lives, could be a movie about observing these three people. But actually, it is about, because of that opening, because of the confrontation of the opening, because of the way that she's looking at you, it becomes about, no, actually, this is the way that she's going to decide how the story is going to get told, right? So the power then shifts just by that look. So, and then the story becomes about what her life is about. So even in being observed, she can have power in that. So to me, it's like, it's like when we talk about the spider and the butterfly, right? It's like, well, it's easy for you to be like, well, Nora in that moment is a butterfly, right? It's about to be eaten by the spider. But then, of course, the butterfly can turn around and look at you and say, like, I see what you are. I see what you're wondering about. I can read your mind. And guess what? You have no fucking clue. And I'm going to tell you. I'm not going to kind of give you some fake answer. She could say all kinds of things. She's like, well, I grew up in Korea, But instead, I'm going to be like, no, I'm actually a time traveler. I'm actually somebody who travels through time and space, and I exist as this person who is loved by these two people very differently. And in that way, I'm a portal between these two people who have no business knowing each other, right? And both of them love this woman, and they love her in a different way, in a different language, in different cultures, right? And what an amazing thing! You're like a time and space collapsing. You're the door, right? So in that way, her power is being able to not just say like, well, this is my story, but being able to say, it's like, observe this. We're gonna not just live in this life. We're gonna live in the one that before, and we're gonna live in the future too. And she, through her love, is able to have authority in that. Right? She's able to bend time and space. So to me, it's like, well, yeah, she's like an astronaut, right? Yeah. So I think in that way, I think you're describing the right thing. As in, like, it is about the confrontation of that. I think it's like, it could be about that. It could be like a slice of life. Everybody just looking at what she went through, or it could be about how, the thing that Haesung says at the end, which is that we'll see you then, see you in the next life. Yeah.
It's so fascinating to hear you describe this, because you're shining a light on the experience I had in the film that I think was very unconscious. But is that the effect of that opening scene is that I never forgot myself throughout the film. I was as a viewer, I was a part of every scene, and I don't think I ever let go of that feeling of like respecting her privacy in some ways. And that is that's a very powerful way to present a protagonist. That's extremely unusual, actually, because most films kind of say, all right, well, you're going to get inside this person and see through their eyes. But I think because of the opening, I found myself looking through my eyes at her story, and that's really
That's so interesting because I feel like I think you're pointing to something because I feel like it's interesting when we talk about empathy, right? Because I feel like empathy, we talk about it as you're right. What we're trying to, it seems at times like what art's trying to do is to make the audience feel like the characters that are inside the film.
Sure,
and I think that's very common. And by the way, that's a very common note from studio, you know what I mean? It's kind of like that where they're like, well, does the audience relate?
Yeah, right,
Right?
right.
Does the audience feel like the main character? But I actually believe that there is, and I think it is in the conversation, if you've seen the film, between Arthur and Nora. So Nora's the main character and Arthur is her American husband. And when they talk about it, they're talking about the difference they have. They have a different language, right? And they talk about that. And to me, I'm like, well, why is it that the audience is always being asked to be the same as the protagonist of the film? Actually, I think that it's very important that the audience feels like they're a human being who's encountering a different human being, right? And I think that when we talk about empathy, I think that it is sometimes, I think, misconstrued as like, well, sometimes the audience is asked to identify themselves so directly with the character. What that means is that the actor is also going to be a default actor, right? And the performance has to be default, right? And then the audience is like, well, I wouldn't have cried there, right? I wouldn't have done that, or like I would have done that, like sometimes. But my thing is like, at the end of Past Lives, the main character doesn't get into Uber, right? And then the Uber has her past and her childhood sweetheart, and the Uber goes away. And so often, my audience, there'll be members of the audience who come up to me in a bit of a huff, and they'll be like, I would have gotten into Uber. And I'm like, that's great. That's wonderful. I'm so happy that for you that in a situation, something like that one, where you care for this person in that way, and then you feel this way, and you're married, maybe you would get into Uber. And what an amazing discovery for yourself that you are different than the main character of my movie, right? Yeah. But I think it's a really beautiful thing, and I also feel like it's like, to me, Past Lives, as I was going around all over the world with this movie, I heard every end of the spectrum. Like there were people in long-term relationships who were like, I watched your film and it made me really, really appreciate my partner, and it made me really love my partner more. And I realized that after I finished watching the movie, I hugged and kissed my partner and I said, I'm so happy, I feel so lucky spending this life with you. And I hope we spend the next one together too. So moving. And then of course there'll be, another audience right next to them. They'll be like, I'm in a bad relationship. I need to get out, and I need to go, I need to find that girl that I remember from that one Paris exchange program, and I need to go see her, I think. All right, I'm gonna go and break up with my girlfriend, right? So you can have both completely different reaction to the same film. And then, of course, if you're single, there's another thing where it's like, you have a similar thing where it's like, well, I think that, I'm finally gonna make that move, and I'm gonna go and fly to another country, and then, I'm gonna go and I'm gonna reconnect with my ex. And then, of course, somebody next to them who's also single, they'll be like, this movie really helped me get over my ex. Not in this lifetime, right? So to me, it's like, well, I think that that's what us as the human race, as we're telling each other stories and, going through all that, I feel like that is actually such a fundamental part of what this is supposed to be. So to me, I'm like, I think there is something really beautiful about the difference. Right, and I think that at the end of the day, I'm like, well, you were feeling. It's like, well, you felt like you were still a person who exists outside of the movie, encountering the film. And I'm like, well, there is such humanity in that, because what that means is the scope of the film becomes massive. Scope of the film becomes the world, right? It's like, it's not just like you're not transported into the fantasy land that is within the film, and the scope is no matter how big within the film. It's actually the scope of the film becomes your own life. Right? And nothing is bigger than our own lives, because it's the only reality we have, right? So to me, I'm like, well, it's actually without question that it's very important to me that you feel different than the character of Nora in my film, right? For example, or like any of the characters in anything I do. There has to be a feeling that it's like, I would have gotten into Uber. I'm like, yes, That's great. You know, or you'd be like, no, she was right to not get into Uber. And I'm like, great. That reveals actually so much about who you are as a person, and what an honor it is for me to have made something that makes you have a revelation about yourself, right? Like it's an artist's
that's the
fucking
best.
dream,
That's the best.
right?
So we only have a couple minutes left.
Great.
We have 2 minutes. So sorry to interrupt you, but I want to make sure that we get to your fifth.
What was my fifth? Well, I can say a couple things. Oh, you know what? I would say I'm Not There. The Todd Haynes film about Bob Dylan.
Yes.
I love that film so much. And I think about that film, once that movie was playing because I think somebody was watching it, and I was in the other room, and I was sitting there just listening to the soundtrack. Or like I was listening to the way the movie moves. And then I just realized that actually a film is a piece of music. And I think that to me was always like such an that's also, again, it became a very important guiding principle. It's probably the latest thing that I was thinking about, where it's like, you know, like filmmaking is about bending time and space, right? It's about collapsing and moving time and space in the way that you want. You're basically a time magician and a space magician. So a part of that is that, you know, like Todd Haynes is an amazing musician. And I think that that's what makes him an amazing filmmaker. And to me, I feel like I remember watching that film and being like, it's all, the right language and the right piece of music, and then the right image is gonna appear at exactly the right time in a way that a piece of music works, right? Like the exact note, for some reason, it's the only note that's possible, has to be in the right place at the right time. And we don't know why, but it will all work. And again, because music is also math, I really think of filmmaking as math too. So I think it's like, and especially it's very true in editing, right?
Yes.
You know, like it was really important to me when I was choosing my editor for Past Lives, and he's also worked on my second film, and he'll probably work on my next one too. My editor, Keith Fraze, he is a son of 2 accountants. And when we first talked, he was like, I'm very good at math. And I was like, you're my man. We're gonna do some math together. Because the truth is that it's amazing, because in editing, even shaving frames, even shaving like, sometimes like Keith and I are fully shaving 4 frames, right? Yeah. Which is like, may not be perceptible, but it is fully perceptible in the rhythm that we are living in. Right. Now, I don't think that like my rhythm is necessarily the same as any other filmmaker's rhythm or any of your rhythm, but I think that what I can trust is my own internal rhythm for my own story and my own piece of music that I'm trying to make, right? And also different films I make is gonna have a different rhythm. Yes. Like I would say this new film that I made probably has a slightly faster rhythm. So it's like making a song in that way. And I think that I'm Not There, Todd Haynes' I'm Not There, which is an amazing film. I think to me that was a movie that really taught me that. That's a movie that made me realize that filmmaking is just composing a piece of music, which is like, you know, time and space, images and sound that are coming together, and it all comes down to math. You know, like 10 frames here, you know, 1 frame here too long is wrong, you know? And then the sound should come in exactly at that moment. And you're like, and it's just like music. And I think if you talk to any musician, you know, I think they would say the same thing. Sometimes it's not, I wish that it was like logical, if it could be something that we could learn in school. But I don't think it is. I think it just can only exist as something that is within you. So what that also means is that you have to trust yourself and your own internal rhythm. And you can usually tell when you watch a filmmaker's, you know, any filmmaker's films, everybody has their own unique rhythm, right? And sometimes they're playing around with it, sometimes they're being a little jazzy with it, but usually you can tell what their core math is, right? And how they want their time and space to move, you know.
Oh, I love that.
Well, it was a very beautiful expression from a filmmaker whose name is Song.
Your last name is Song. Which is
Did you not know?
I was like, who is this person? I thought I was the only person with last name Song. I'd love to know.
Who are you talking about? Well, Celine, thank you so much. This has been so lovely.
Much for this.
Thank you, guys.